Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be joining you again. It's been a while. I'm really happy to be back this year and excited that our first presentation for the year is all about the environment and how we actually care for the little creatures around us. Tonight I'm speaking to Jonathan Haw, and Jonathan started Ecosolutions many years ago with a project called the Owl Project as one of the initiatives. We're going to predominantly speak about the Owl Project today. It's really, really great in terms of what you can do. And I'd love for you to get involved looking at owls within your school space and a range of other creatures. I'm going to begin by sharing with you the Christmas video, which for me is really, really interesting and gives you a perspective of what they actually do with the project, with the Owl Project around the year. So have a look at this lovely little video.
Happy Christmas to everybody around the world.
Happy Christmas to everybody around the world. From the Owl Project in South Africa.
We thank the Owl Project for giving us a chance for taking care of their owls.
We give a woof.
So for me, caring for owls is just so important and teaching children about them. So hello, Jonathan. We're really excited to have you here and to be sharing about these amazing projects that you run. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the project.
Well, about myself, I don't have much to say, but the project itself is, it's been going for about 20 years now, and it started, there's a couple of reasons for it. So I kind of get the feeling that a lot of my audience, or the audience here tonight, is teachers, and I'm sure some of them are biology teachers. So just to touch on the dilemma of owls in South Africa, or owls in townships, or owls in general. One of the problems is, you know, we get a lot of owls in townships, and there's a narrative out there that Black people are terrified of owls. So owls don't know that. They don't know that that's the mythology. All they're looking for are rats. And townships tend to have a very high rodent population. So when you've got a lot of prey, you generally get predators coming in to catch that prey. And that's what we found in townships. Now, years ago, the idea was that if someone had owls in their roof, or they had owls breeding in their school, they would phone a center who would come and collect those owls and take them away. That's very problematic from a biology perspective, because first of all birds are homing birds. You know, we all think that pigeons are homing birds, but actually all birds are homing birds. So when you remove an owl from Alexander Township and you drive it out into the country and you release it, it goes straight home. And that's what happens. So, and often in attempting to get home, it dies, because the further away you release it, it's compromised, it's been in a box, it's been in a cage for a few days, then you open the door and you release it, and it'll try and fly home immediately. And in that attempt to get home, it crosses all sorts of other owl territories, and it's either killed or it starves, it doesn't make it back. So the majority of these owls die on the way home. So that doesn't really make much sense. And because the rodent populations are so high, and barn owls specifically can just pick up the breeding, and they can produce 16 chicks that are in one clutch.
Wow.
populations are so high. So they just fill that hole as quickly as they can. So you haven't really solved any problems doing that. So our project was started really to educate kids and to work against that mythological narrative. And to get owls to be, left in these places because they're doing such a good job of controlling rats. And in townships, rodents are a huge problem. So it was if they can stay, it's a win-win for everybody, for owls, well, not really for rats, but for owls and for people, for residents. So
but it's great for the ecosystem, isn't it? That's what we want. We want as natural ecosystems in urban areas and rural areas. So keeping the mixture of creatures so that the balance is kept just makes so much sense.
Well, the idea that, we all have an idea that owls should be, that they're wild and they shouldn't occur in a place like Alexander Township or Soweto or that kind of thing, because it doesn't fit that picture of the game reserve and where wild things live. But the reality of barn owls is, years ago, a girl was doing her master's at Wits, and she was looking at owl breccia that was found in caves in Gladysville, which was 2.5 million year old owl pellets. And pretty much from the moment we've been making a mess, from the moment we've been throwing our bones outside our cave, we've had rats. And as a result of that, we've had owls too. So we've lived with barn owls in every environment for, as far as we know, for the last 2.5 million years. So they're pretty much inextricably linked to our history. And townships are high rodent populations, lots of barn owls. That's urban ecology. That's
very true. I believe you've got some awesome pictures to share with us about your projects. Do you want to go ahead and share some of the pictures? Okay. For those of you who are watching, please pop your questions into the chat. We'd love to answer your questions. Look at the things that Jonathan's beginning to share in the next few minutes. And here we go.
Okay. So this is, can I go?
Yes.
Okay. So the idea of without education there can be no conservation is pretty straightforward, especially here. People, that's the stumbling block that conservation has is education. So that was the kind of the Owl Project logo or statement. But just here's a picture. This is in a roof, in a township roof. You can see how many eggs are there. I think when we counted them, there were 10 baby owls in this nest. Okay, and they've got into, and the reason there's so many is just because there's so much food available. And owls, I tell kids when I talk to them that owls can count, because they work out how many rats there are, and then that's how many eggs they have or how many chicks they have. But actually, it's to do with the fat content on the female. If she's very fat, she'll lay and lay and lay, and that's what determines how many eggs she lays. But they can't count when it comes to bringing food. So if there's a big clutch, they'll just keep on provisioning. Sometimes we find owls in these nests, and they're in a carpet of dead rats they've just been brought, too many for them to feed on. But these are a whole lot of barn owls inside a roof. Now, to remove these and take them somewhere else is a mistake. And we've got to the stage now, 20 years later, when someone phones us and says, listen, I've got owls in my roof. A lot of the time, we don't even go. We just send kids from the local school. And they go and speak to the homeowner and say, no.
So lovely.
They're catching our rats. So, and this is an idea. This is a chimney where a whole lot of owls were eggs and chicks, and these are sub-adults. They're all fully feathered. But there's 9 or 10 owls in this chimney, and they're packed in there like sardines. And we went back a week later, and they'd all fledged, and they were out of there, and the chimney was empty. But this is how short of the short of breeding space, but also the fact that there's so many owls because there's so many rats. So this is just the kind of what it looks like on the ground in places like Alex. But this thing has extended now to schools across the country, and it's not just township based anymore. And education was the key to it. So it was just really teaching kids that we didn't give up on adults, but we kind of thought the kids could teach their parents. Okay, so it was a kind of an adult education program sort of brought about by the kids coming home and saying, and one of the things that we did in the early stages, or we still do now, but we implemented it early on, was all of the kids who participated had to actually get a letter of consent from their parents in townships. So their parents would say, yes, that's fine, they can work with owls, they can do this owl project. And strange enough, we didn't have any kids come back and say their parents hadn't signed that letter of consent.
That's wonderful.
I think it's a lot of the parents that we meet the kids at schools in Alex or Sebokeng or Soweto, they're really happy that the kids are going to school and getting a good education. And they almost hang on the child's every word, you know, when they come home and say, this is what we did today. The parents are totally enamored with that kind of information. So a lot of talking to kids, okay? Owls, these are owls that have come into rehabilitation centers that we show kids, and invariably we would do some of these owl releases at schools. So this owl in Delina's hand there will be, it'll be ringed. We'll put a ring on it with a number so we can find it, bump into it later on down the road. The kids will get to have a look at it. And owls are pretty calm. This is not a stressful event, and it's not like it's a sort of once-off as they go into the release pen. And the whole idea behind it is it makes it very three-dimensional for the kids. It's not somebody standing up there with a picture of an owl saying this is an owl and this is what they actually get to see it. And yeah, it's all part of this project. So these are owls about to be released. And there you can see Hussein. Hussein puts rings on all these owls, and as far as I know, he's definitely put more rings on owls than anybody else in the country. But I don't know if he still is, but he was the first black ringer in South Africa. So he must have put rings on over 3,000 owls, Hussein.
And if we look at these where they release them, do the children get involved? How do you involve the children with the actual owls? So is there a way that the children can actually physically get involved with the owls?
Absolutely. It's actually one of our problems has been that, you know, a lot of these things are driven by the ship's captain. So if the headmaster's keen or the biology teacher's keen, the project flies. But we do sometimes find is that a teacher may be a little too protective of the owls. And we've got to speak to them and say, listen, the kids, actually, this is a kids project. You know, you can't say, well, the kids can't come near it. I'm feeding the owls tonight. And so the kids have to be involved. They're very involved, and they're involved in various ways. When the owls are in the pen, they've got to feed them every day. And they feed them on Saturdays. I don't think they feed on Sundays, but they've got to feed them every day. They've got to clean pens. They've got to keep an eye on these owls, and they're in their care. And that's one of the teachers. I
want to add to that. So I know many years ago at St. Stithians, we had owls, and we fed them on a Sunday too. So the children would choose who would want to come in on the weekend, and then we'd meet them, and they would go in and feed them the dead little chicks, even on a Sunday.
Yeah. Nowadays we give people Sunday off. It's a lot easier nowadays. We've kind of made it easier for everybody. But, you know, one of these headmaster at Marlborough Garden said to me, who actually was giving an interview to an American television company, and he was saying that, and I hadn't appreciated this, but he was saying that for his kids in Alex, the feeding and looking after these little owls it taught them nurture. And in an environment that didn't have a lot of nurture in it, in terms of, you know, looking after a puppy or a hamster or a cat, or that it wasn't really part of their day-to-day environment or their lifestyle. So feeding these little owls was for him, the key point of it was that they were actually nurturing something and learning to look after and nurture something, which I thought was very nice. But this slide here these are posters that we put up through townships and just saying that rat poison, one of the biggest problems in these places is the use of aldicarb or temic, or what they call it two-step, which is a poison that they use for rats. And every year, hundreds of kids actually arrive in hospitals. I know kids have died from eating it. One of the ways the application of it is to take this aldicarb and work it into mealie meal, and then leave it lying around the house so the rats will eat it, and toddlers come through and eat it and die. So this idea was, you don't want to use that rat poison. Owls don't poison our food. Owls will, and this was a project, these posters were in conjunction with a company in America called Raptors Are the Solution, a very interesting, very anti-rodenticide company in America that does a lot of good work. So these were the posters. They went up on spaza shops and in the street and bus stops, and they were all done in the kind of I think they were done in 8 or 9 of the official languages. So they were positioned in language that was predominant in that area. And there's one in the bus stop. So this was all part of the education initiative. Okay, just you know, Karen, I put the slide to show together, and I kind of put it all. It was a slides from other shows, other presentations and things. So there's a little bit. I don't know if I wanted to get to this slide right now, but I will, because this is part of the education. One of the things we've done. I mean, you must bear in mind that over 20 years, 260,000 children have participated in this project.
It's incredible.
It's a lot. And one of the things they do is they answer a questionnaire. And the questionnaire, after the project, we've compared, I think we did 3,000 kids who've participated and compared them to 3,000 kids at schools who hadn't. And these were the discrepancies we found. This was, do you think owls can be used for medicine? And the other one, there were 5 or 6 questions. Do you think owls are scary? And these kids would answer them. And the interesting thing about it is the kids who participated were totally sold on the Owl Project. And that's one of the things that I tell reporters when they want to get a statement. I say to them, go into any of these participative schools and ask the first kid you see, what is an owl? And that kid will respond, it catches rats. Bamba ama gundwan, it catches rats. And that's what an owl does. But the interesting thing about this research was that, and this was presented at a world conference in, I think in India and possibly also in Portugal. But the interesting thing about this was we gave the same questionnaires to take home to kids to give to their parents. And we had very similar results. So the parents of these kids were owl friendly as opposed to parents of kids who had never participated. And that was very interesting. These kids were educating their parents.
That is such a great story.
Yeah, it makes sense. And owls eat rats. I mean, that's the reality. Our enemy's enemy is our friend, and owls are enemies to rats, and rats in townships are a real problem. And
rats, I mean, if you think about it, rats and mice are a problem everywhere. So therefore, we should be doing this in every school because all our children should be welcoming it. And we should all know how to handle or what to do with owls and not be using poisons.
Absolutely. And schools, just because of the way schools are, they're perfect. Because first of all, there's usually a little distance between schools in terms of the geographic layout of schools. So they kind of come with their own territory. They're quiet at night, which is perfect for owls. And we can lock off quite a big area. They've got open fields, they've got open space. They can, usually they've got a rodent population from litter, from things like that. But we can lock off a poison-free, the school participates and doesn't use poison. So we can lock off quite a big poison-free nursery for these owls to fledge into. And so schools are fantastic for owl releases. So these were taxis. I think about 200 taxis, and Alex put these stickers on. Owls eat rats. When this thing started, maybe I was, 20 years ago, perhaps I was optimistic or idealistic. And I believed that narrative of Black people are scared of owls could be changed. And so that it wasn't the case. But the narrative seems to lag behind the reality. So I still hear that all the time. And maybe I'm not going to get to a place where that becomes Black people aren't scared of owls. But what we are going to get to, I'm hoping, is not all Black people are scared of owls. I've tempered my ambition. But
I suppose the more children we educate, those children become adults, they have families, and so it permeates. It just then grows. And so I suppose that's where the narrative is, and that we want people to understand our environment and understand the creatures that are in the environment. So the way we do it in terms of education is exactly that. And like this video, this news article that you've got here, where even getting the taxi drivers involved and saying, hey, let's talk about owls. They're not bad. They're really great. I think is also really, really important. So it becomes a whole community thing because the kids are chattering about it.
And also a lot of these taxi drivers, kids go to some of the participating schools. So there's that, but there's also, after 20 years now, we're getting to the stage where we can talk to kids who were participating 20 years ago. And there was this project won an award, Conservation of the Year award on ANN 7. And we declined the award because it was ANN 7. It was strange. We got more likes for declining it than we did when we put it up that we were, but the reality of it is we spoke to a girl who had participated 20 years ago at Sebokeng, and she was saying what the project taught her was that if she was scared of something, she just needed to find out a little bit more about it. And that's really the key to this. Just read up on it, learn a bit about it, and that helps overcome these kind of fears. So,
and I mean, you've mentioned two things now where the project actually has other benefits in terms of, now you've said go and research something. So making them aware that we can educate ourselves in instances that we want to. I think that's really important. Also, that's saying to children, take ownership of your learning, and that's what this seems to be doing incidentally as well.
And so this picture here is, in terms of education, these are owl pellets. Okay, so these bags you see are just owl pellets that we've collected from various places, townships, from owl boxes that are occupied. I think we've got about 130 occupied owl boxes in Joburg alone at the moment. Wow. So we write the coordinates on, and we give these pellets to kids to dissect with a key, and they dissect these pellets. And
can you just go back a step and explain to people what is a pellet? It's not a bullet or a...
No, an owl swallows its rat generally whole, and that's why a rat's head, it's kind of V-shaped. So it gets it into its mouth by the head, and then it chugs it down. And one of the things years ago, some kids said to me, no, the rats in Alex are much too big for an owl to eat a little owl. So we got a little owl and gave it a full-grown rat, township rat. And it must have taken about 40 minutes for that owl to eat that rat. And it ate it. 40 minutes later, there was just a tail sticking out of the owl's mouth. And the kids were totally amazed. And I said to them, the amazing thing really is that 4 hours from now, this owl will do exactly the same thing with a rat, another rat, the same size as the one it's just eaten. So an owlet comes out of an egg, and 35 days later, it's fully grown. So its growth rate is tremendous. And that's why they eat more than their parents. So in terms of a rodent control, you can roughly estimate that a family of barn owls probably consumes about 2,000 rats a year. It's significant. And it's not just the number that they eat. It's also, rats are quite clever. So when they know that if they cross an open field, there's a chance they're going to be eaten by an owl, they won't cross that field. And that's called behavior trait mediation. So you changing their behavior, they have to keep to the underground or undergrowth, because otherwise they might be eaten by something. When there aren't predators present, you don't have that. They can come and go as they please. They can forage as much as they like, and it increases the population. So just the presence of owls actually reduces rodent populations. So
there's a question from Lindsay. She's saying, how many owls are supported per square meter or kilometer in a suburb?
Okay, so that's to do with territories. And territories are elastic. They're really governed by how much food. So if you've got enough food in a 2-hectare area, that's all you need. And if you need more, your territory will get bigger. So there's no real block that you can cut off and say this is the size an owl needs for a territory. And barn owls in particular, I mean, we've got a lot of barn owl boxes up at Stark Airs in Kempton Park, and those nests are very close together, and they're all occupied. So they're not communal, but they can be quite communal. And if rodent populations are high, then their territories become very small. So that question is difficult to answer. We really generally suggest about 5 hectares per box, but we're seeing things, we're learning so much. I mean, barn owls, if you go to old bird books, they breed once a year in March, April, May. We're finding some of these owls are breeding twice, even sometimes 3 times a year. And there's a whole lot of, I mean, barn owls have one of the things that they're looking at is that barn owls will, if one nest is on small chicks and their prey or food requirements are higher than their neighbor, the neighbor will delay their breeding so that they're on eggs, so that their neighbor can use more territory. When those chicks fledge, the eggs of the neighbor hatch, and then they increase their territory for feeding those youngsters. So there's a lot of complexities in these things that we're only really starting to scratch the surface with now when we're looking at them kind of specifically. So this is one of the ways we quantify how many rats have been eaten, by weighing them. So we'll weigh a pellet, and it'll weigh 3 grams or 4 grams. And then we'll take all the pellets we've collected, stick them on the scale and say, okay, so if one rat weighs 3 grams in a pellet, this is 5 kgs. So that's however many rats that would work out to be. And then we dish them out to kids. And all these pictures were taken pre-COVID. So these masks and gloves aren't COVID related. They're actually just pre-COVID. So they were all preparing themselves, masks and gloves everywhere. And they get tweezers, they get a little petri dish, and they get a bottle with a pellet in it and a key. And that bottle has coordinates on it. So once they've finished dissecting it, they put it all back in the bottle and they send it off to us, and that gets loaded up on a database. Now, for a child or a student database, citizen science database like this, I'm not sure, but I would imagine this must be one of the biggest in the world. I mean, there's thousands of kids that have participated and contributed to that database. And every now and then they find something that's interesting. They'll find a bird skull or something different, and they can identify that, send it through to us, and we keep all this data. So,
Speak about the data, about how you've observed the different types of rats for areas within the pellets. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
We definitely do pick up trends and not just trends that are area specific, but even just seasonalities, that, like, you know, different rats at different time of the year. So once we get into rural schools, we're starting to hit or get more multi-mammoth mice and things like that. And in townships, we're getting rattus, we're getting the traditional rat. So we can plot all these things out there, you know, what's happening in terms of the prey that these owls are eating. And these are kids, all these kids are sitting here. And I mean, I've got these slides just go on, just kids dissecting owl pellets and seeing. But the educational aspect of this is the putting the two and two together, which is owls eat rats. You know, and that's really what these kids are establishing, that every pet. Now, you asked me what a pellet is, and I didn't quite get around to that. But so an owl eats a rat whole, and then in the morning, it brings up all the indigestible stuff, the fur and the bone that it wasn't able to digest. It comes out of its mouth in the form of a furry pellet. And that's what these kids are dissecting or breaking up. So that's what the pellet actually comprises of. It's a furry pellet of indigestible. In fact, barn owls often use these pellets to lay their eggs on. So they lay their eggs and they raise their chicks on rat fur. So these are kids. You can see that bottle next to that kid's got all the coordinates written on it and the date and what have you. And when he's finished, he packs it back in that bottle. And it goes on and on and on. It's just kids dissecting owl pellets all over the country all the time.
So if a school wants to do that, how do they get hold of you? Is it just do they just ask for it, or how does that work?
They just drop an email through to Ecosolutions or owlproject.org, either of the two, and the team will go around there with all these pellets. They'll say how many kids, and the team will go around there, and they'll have a morning of pellet dissection with an owl talk, and they'll do this. I mean, these were parents. The kids had an open day, and a lot of the parents came through. So these were parents of school kids dissecting owl pellets on Saturday morning. So
but that's a great idea too. I mean, I think for most schools to get parents to come to school is a difficult thing. But if you're saying to your parents, come in and actually learn about owls and come and see the work your kids are doing and experience it, I think that's a great initiative.
Absolutely. And I mean, the kids love it. You know, they're busy hanging over their mother, saying, "Don't like that, like this. Don't do that, do this." So everyone gets involved. And then so there was the owl pellet dissection and the kids dissecting pellets. There was the releasing owls. I think that actually the releasing owls carries on a little bit later on. But this was the Alex Owl Day, which was the kids at these schools wanted to showcase. They wanted to let everybody, because in Alex there's people walking up and down the street all the time, and so they wanted to show everyone that they were an owl-friendly school. And this is where Alex Owl Day was created. It must have been 7 or 8 years ago, I would imagine now. And these are all some of the kids who've participated. But the first one, this was Marlborough Gardens, the Alex Owl Day. This, as I say, was about 7 years ago. And this was, they all drew owls on these. That's all little wooden boards. And those wooden boards are actually the offcut, the insert from the owl box. So when we cut out the owl box window or door for the owls to get in, those were all the offcuts that these kids used. And I think, I'm not sure, I think we probably did about 1,500 of those the first year that we participated. And it's changed a bit, and it's evolved a bit since then. But those were the first ones. And then we started presenting their art at the BirdLife South Africa show at Rudaport National Gardens. And it's been actually, there's this kid's art is in America, it's in Holland, it's in India, it's in Portugal, it's all over the world now. And they've done different themes every year. So they come through to the botanical gardens. The taxi drivers, those very taxi drivers with those stickers, bring through all these kids through to botanical gardens to come and this was just the day before loading all the stuff up to take it through. You can just see it's an incredible amount of art that we have. And these were the same offcuts, but these were turned into owls, and the kids painted, and so colorful. You know, it's just so much color, and then put these outside their school, and at one stage they were all on the Joburg Zoo fence, and they were all positioned along the fence of the Joburg Zoo. And these are kids pointing out, and then there were masks that they did, and these are kids pointing out the masks that they did at the BirdLife Fair, different kids who came through. And then I think 2 years ago, they actually did these three-dimensional, these kind of jigsaw puzzle owl, I don't know what you'd call them, these statues, where they had to put all the pieces together, paint them all individually, color them in individually, and then put all these owls together.
So for these projects, can any school get involved? And is it the same, just getting hold of you either by phoning or emailing and saying, hey, we want our kids also to take part in this owl project?
The more the merrier.
And do you know what time of year it happens? Is it always the same, or does that change?
Well, the BirdLife Fair has been kind of put on hold because of COVID, so it stopped, and now I think they're doing it more virtually. But hopefully it'll start again. But it's not just the BirdLife Fair. I mean, some of this art, you know, has been displayed, as I say, at the zoo, and you know, we could put it in at Zoo Lake on their art days, or we could, you know, there's all sorts of places. I'd like to see it up at the airport, to be honest. So, you know, there's all sorts of places, and I'm hoping. I mean, we've been going to world conferences and presenting this project and presenting other owl papers and things, but I'm hoping the next one is in America next year. And I'd love some of the kids that who've participated in this project to come to that conference and actually talk about their experience, because no disrespect to all the scientists and professors who give these papers, but I struggle to stay awake sometimes, you know, and I think these kids would add a beautiful component to a serious conference. So I'm trying to arrange that for next year in America. So this is just all so then we've got the owl naming. There's all these things that fit into this that are components. I
just want to, before you go into the owl naming, Natalie has said these are beautiful artworks. They are.
They're absolutely beautiful. I mean, you can see them behind me. I don't know if everyone can see that. You know, and I mean, they're absolutely beautiful. And every now and then you come across one. The one kid gave me one. It was the whole owl was just painted black. But it had these beautiful eyes, you know, so the eyes really got his attention. The rest he just painted black. So there's so much, but the majority of it is so colorful, you know. So the owl naming project is interesting, because one of the things about education or getting people involved is, you know, in Zulu, an owl is isikova, and it doesn't matter whether it's a giant eagle owl or a pearl-spotted owl that's you know, that would fit into your pocket. It's just isikova, and it's very difficult to really appreciate something unless you have a name specific to that owl. So these kids have got together, and in the 11 official languages around the country, they're naming these owls in their own language and giving a specific name to the owl. So they go through the biology of the owl, they chat about it, they discuss it. There's a couple of things they can't name them scary owl or, you know, fat owl or things like that. But they've got to actually read up on what this owl is, where it comes from, what it does, and then they come up with a name for it. And this has been a fantastic initiative. So I don't think I can play this. Jordan said I wouldn't be able to play this, but I'm just going to play it on I've got my phone next to me, and I'm hoping that everyone can hear this. This is the pearl-spotted owlet, okay? And these were kids that came up with this name. And that means little pearl. And it's such a nice name for a pearl-spotted owlet. And these kids and I'm hoping that in years to come, these names will actually be incorporated in the Roberts bird books and the bird books around the country that actually and this has been driven by a whole lot of children in schools around the country.
So how far are you with their project? So can other children or schools get involved with that? How does that actually work with the naming? Because I do think that's such a beautiful idea, that the children in a community and the language they're speaking learn about the owls and then come up with names.
Karen, any school can contact us and we'll get involved, and they can get involved on whatever, however they would like to. You know, they can do the pellet dissections, they can get involved in the naming, they can get involved in owl releases, whatever they'd like to do, we'd like them to do that. So then we've got the owl release program, and the owl release program is something that when the kids love, and it's, you know, a lot of these schools who've participated, like St. Stithians, and you know, some of the schools around the country will participate year in and year out. They just, it's one of those things that they do every term or and these are young owls that have come into captivity. Now, these are only young owls that can't, their SPCAs have picked them up, and we release them from schools. Adult owls, as I mentioned, they'll just try and go home. So these are just youngsters, and they're getting a second kind of chance, and these kids are facilitating their release. So we ring them all. The kids take down the ring number. As you'll remember from St. Stithians, the kids take down the ring numbers. They help us take the measurements. They do all of that stuff, and they keep a kind of database on the owls or the birds of prey. Sometimes they don't. It's not just owls. They get black-shouldered kites and things that come in. But they all become pretty adept at looking after these birds. And we put up a release pen, like you can see behind Hussein. And these kids help. I mean, that kid's holding that little spotted eagle owl while Hussein puts a ring on it. So they get involved. And it's funny, when I give bird talks and things, I so often have someone come up to me at the end of the talk and tell me their story of the interaction they had with an owl when they were a child. And I'm hoping these kids will all feel the same way. You know, they'll all be owl-friendly adults, which is what we're really trying to create.
Exactly.
And there's lots of them. You know, there's these pictures just go on and on. This was actually in Greenside. This was one of our occupied owl boxes in Glen Eagles Road. And I don't know how it worked out, but we wanted to ring them, and we wanted the community, the people who lived there, to come to the ringing. And hello, your presentation just went funny, but we can see and hear you. There we go, it's back. And so a very nice woman who was involved in this project contacted the police and said, listen, can you close this road while we ring these owls? And they said, yes. And the police came and they closed Glen Eagles Road for an afternoon. It was mayhem. And the police didn't know why they were there. And it was like, the significance of, we're ringing some birds, but Glen Eagles Road is closed. It was wonderful. So, and these are kids obviously maybe in a garden where their owl box is occupied, saying they hold that owl while it's saying, and these rings are very important because we bump into them. And interestingly enough, we bumped into an owl a year or so ago that was in an owl box in Dane Fern, I think it was. And we climbed up to the box to put rings on the chicks. And Hussein said, no, that female doesn't want to get out of the box, and she has a ring on her. So I said, well, catch her. Let's call out her ring number. And now with modern technology, I just put it into the ornithological app for UCT, and it came up. And that owl had been ringed in a box in 4 ways 9 years earlier. So that idea that 9 years later there was an owl that had been bred in an owl box was now breeding in a box in Dane Fern and had 3 chicks. That's wonderful data for us. So that's the reason we ring them. This is Rivonia Primary School doing their owl release. And there's a lot of schools that have participated in that. And then the international footprint of this project. This is the kind of, I think, the last bit that we touched on. I went to the Owl Festival in Nepal in about, 2015 or something like that. And I met the guy who runs the Owl Project in Nepal, and they were very similar problems to us in terms of mythological fears of owls and persecution of owls. And so we took owlproject.org there and put up posters and put up some of the art, and it's become a standard thing now. Every year, if we don't go, we send stuff across to them. It's a blank slide.
No worries. There we go, Portugal.
Then we went to the World Owl Conference in Portugal and presented a paper there. And they had an education, like an arm of the conference, or a part of the conference that was educational from around the world. And I was on that panel. And there in that picture, there's the guy from Nepal, there's Carla from America, there's Satish from India, Raju from Nepal, and there's the guy from the UK. There was quite a lot. It was quite well represented, and it was decided then on policies and things like that for education. And then we went to Austria, and Austria was fascinating. We presented, in fact, what we did in Austria is the kids in Alex had a Zoom conversation with the kids in Austria, and they spoke about owls and their project in South Africa, and the kids in Austria spoke about their understanding of owls. You can see from this picture, there's a picture at the back there with the kids in Alex. The kids in Alex were just magnificent. The Austrian kids, they were a bit subdued, you know, but the South African kids were singing and talking about owls and showing their artwork. They were so fantastic, so animated. And this is in Austria, dissecting South African owl pellets in a school in Austria, talking to kids in South Africa about owls and their environmental issues there and the environmental issues in Austria. There you can see, these were the kids actually in Alex, talking to the kids in Austria from the school in Alex. Selina's got it.
With the owl in the room. That's absolutely gorgeous.
Owl in a box, yeah. and actually after Portugal, that guy, Satish, who was in that meeting, he loved the project so much that when he got back to India, he implemented the same kind of education projects in India with art, with all of those things. And when I went to the World Conference in India, Sarah and I went, and they had a special day where they took us through, all the delegates went through, and Satish showed us what they were doing there. But it was all kind of, this was the actual presentation at the conference and things like that. But the owl art festival that these kids were involved in all came as a consequence of the Alexander or the South African Owl Project.org program. It was, and a lot of the South African art was up there at the conference or at the Owl Festival. It was just fantastic.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and these kids were all dressed as owls. They had a little dance up. I can't show you the video, but it was fantastic. There were kids with owls, but they had broomsticks. I don't know how it worked actually. It looked really bizarre, but and their tummies were the owl face. They had an exposed tummy with a broomstick behind them, and they were doing this dance. I had to catch a kid who almost fell off the stage, but it was so beautiful watching these kids, all owl friendly kids who will be owl friendly adults going forwards. There you are. Those are all their tummies. I don't know how. There's a whole section of tummies there with owls painted on them, and then a broomstick behind their tummy that was their arms, and their heads. I mean, their heads with their arms up above their heads. I don't know how they managed to stay like that for as long as they did without kind of collapsing. But it was fascinating. Sarah there in India. So this project is kind of moving around, and it's been showcased all over the world. And that was on Indian TV about the project. And as a consequence of that, the Owl Hall of Fame kind of, put this project in the Owl Hall of Fame in 2018. So it's kind of been recognized in America in the Owl Hall of Fame. It was inaugurated into the Owl Hall of Fame in 2018. And I actually went over to Wisconsin to collect this. And there's Carla and Hein who run the International Owl Center. And also, this is the BirdLife. This project won an award, the Eagle Owl Award, which is a lifetime contribution to bird conservation in South Africa. And that was a very nice sort of acknowledgement of the work that we've been doing over the last 20 years. And there's Dame Jane. I'm sure people will recognize her. And she's been very supportive of this project. And I think the last slide is up now. And this was she wrote me a note, just basically saying that all the things that we did, that we can make this a better world for everybody. And she loves the project. What you're doing is amazing. And I look forward to working with you. And they've been very supportive of this project going forwards. So essentially, that's it. I think that was my last slide. I don't know how long I've spoken for. Probably too long.
Well, we've got a minute or two to finish off, but I really think that it's to say to schools, just get involved, contact Jonathan and his team at Ecosolutions. So info@Ecosolutions. There's the landline number and the cell phone number, and see how your children can get involved. You've seen all the different types of things. If you hop onto the website, owlproject.org, you will see all the different things that Jonathan has spoken about this evening and how you can get involved. So Jonathan, as we end off, what's the kind of thing that you would leave with teachers so that they would contact you? What's the kind of thing you want to say to them?
I'm hoping that the last 45 minutes of me talking is going to get them to contact us. But what I think is that kids love it. They really do, and they learn so much. And actually, there's, strange enough, the kids who've participated in this project, we took a shot in the dark and gave them a bat questionnaire. And they were more positive about bats than kids who hadn't participated. So at the end of the day, the only way that we can really sustain our environment is by having awe and amazement for it. And this is a project that teaches kids awe and amazement.
And I don't know if you can see or if your project is still up, but Natalie's saying it's wonderful what you guys do for these children. And I agree with you, Natalie. It really is wonderful, Jonathan, the things that your team have done with owls and the things that you've done with bats and other creatures. So there are a range of different things. Hop onto the Ecosolutions website. You'll see bird feeders and bat boxes and owl boxes, and there's that whole space. And then there's the Owl Project, which focuses on the owls and those types of things. But there's a range of things that Ecosolutions can really help you with. Whether you're a biology teacher or you're teaching life skills, or you just want to make your children aware of these gorgeous creatures. We all have gardens in our schools. How are we attracting the animals? Often the people who are looking after the gardens at school use poisons. How can we introduce animals that will take away the pests that we don't want rather than putting in the poisons? I think we all have a responsibility to looking after our environment. And if we each do our little bit, it makes a difference. So Jonathan, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and for sharing. I really appreciate all the trouble you went to with putting the slides together and for sharing these amazing things that you've done with all these children, and look forward to hearing about the things you're going to do in the future.
Thank you very much for having me, Karen.
Thanks, everyone. Good night, everyone. I'm going to end the broadcast.